the World segment tonight, in a stunning upset, Britain's Conservative Party suffered major losses in yesterday's general election. Prime Minister Theresa May vowed to remain in power and form a coalition government that she says will provide certainty and lead Britain forward. But with Conservatives so weakened in Europe, what does this mean for our fight against terrorism? Watch.
Determined to form a government, despite a disastrous result in the snap election that she asked for. British Prime Minister Theresa May off to Buckingham Palace, asking Queen Elizabeth for permission to stay in power, and is in talks with Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party, who secured 10 seats. A resurgent Labour Party denied her an outright win, throwing the country into political turmoil as no clear winner emerged. And leader Jeremy Corbyn calling for the Prime Minister to resign.
With me now from the Daily Caller News Foundation, Sagar and Jetty. Sagar, good to see you.
Good to see you, Liz.
All right, Sagar, this is all still unfolding. Very interesting to watch the elections happening across the pond. I mean, there's so many angles that we need to examine this from. Let's start with the terror aspect. I mean, Britain suffered 3 major terror attacks this year, 2 of them within the last month and a half. What does this election mean? The fact that the Conservative Party, Theresa May's own party, lost their majority in the parliament. What does this mean for terrorism, the fight against radical Islam in Britain?
Well, so luckily what it means is that, you know, the government is going to continue, the security services are going to continue to be ramped up. But one of the bigger implications here, and this goes to the long-term fight against radical Islamic terrorism, is that when the Conservatives lost their majority, they lost their ability to guarantee that there's going to be something called a hard Brexit. Now, what hard Brexit means is that they completely withdraw from the European Union, the single market, and the ability of EU citizens to live and work in the UK, basically, you know, without having to apply for a visa, which was one of the major issues during the election. Now, the Democratic Unionist Party doesn't want a hard Brexit, so that actually could be quite a big change for how Brexit eventually unfolds, and it could mean that just about anybody with an EU passport could continue to live and remain within the UK.
Right, so it wouldn't theoretically make that much, I guess, difference from where they are now. But these negotiations between the UK and the European Union when it comes to Brexit, those are coming up fairly quickly. I'm not sure what argument Theresa May is going to be able to make for a hard exit from the European Union. Like you were saying, I'm not sure how she can go in there and say, well, I called this snap election to come away with a mandate, but we got the opposite, and here I am to negotiate.
Yeah, I mean, now she's being ridiculed at home and she's being ridiculed abroad. And unfortunately, what's even worse is that the EU is going to try and make an example of her, essentially, because they don't want any more of their member states to leave the Union. And so what that means is they're probably going to take a pretty tough line on the negotiations. And the UK government isn't going to be able to say that they have a block of votes that will vote down any sort of conciliatory deal at home. So, I mean, it's just an absolute mess in terms of what the unionists are going to be. The unionists are going to allow the Conservatives to try and push through the Parliament. Already, there's a lot of division within the Conservative Party itself. She comes out absolutely weakened by this. The EU's hand is definitely strengthened, and they may try and punish the UK for leaving the European Union.
Oh, I wouldn't put it past them. I wouldn't put it past them at all. Sagar, let me ask you this, though. I mean, I guess what caused this? Theresa May did not have to call this election. She chose to. She thought that she would be getting that mandate. She thought she would be increasing her majority. Why? I mean, why did she end up losing? Why did other parties end up gaining so much ground on her?
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting question. And so the way it actually looks like is the third parties in the UK basically collapsed. And a lot of those votes went to the Labour Party, which is actually basically what happened. So, I mean, you had the UKIP party, the UK Independence Party, whose basically entire position was Brexit. But it's really funny because after they voted for Brexit, all of those voters ended up voting for Labour. And so, you know, Labour basically gained those seats. The Conservative Party thought they may gain those seats. And there was also a pretty substantial party that used to be a big deal in UK politics called the Liberal Democrats, and they also all but collapsed in this election. So you basically see, like, the third parties have collapsed, and they basically went Conservative and Labour, and a lot more of them went Labour than they did Conservative.
Right, and I think we've heard a lot of analysts, too, especially analysts within the UK, talking about why Theresa May lost these seats. You know, whether it was due to the terror attacks, especially the two recent ones, whether it was due to people's changing ideas, almost buyer's remorse on Brexit. But also, I mean, it seems to me, and I'm not in Britain, so maybe I don't have the same feeling as the people there, but it seems to me that this is almost like an ego trip for Theresa May, because she was never elected. She took over after David Cameron. Her party was elected, but she'd never been on the ballot, and it almost seemed like she wanted that validation.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem here is Theresa May basically ran a presidential-like campaign in which she made herself the face of it, and she's taking a very technocratic approach to Brexit. Now, I've been speculating about this, and I've seen some analysts say it as well. I mean, nobody voted for Brexit in order to see, Theresa May talk about, the negotiations. They wanted to talk about freedom, and that's not really something that she was emphasizing throughout her campaign. Basically, she ran a very, to borrow a phrase from our domestic politics, kind of a low-energy campaign, which was, bolstered by a slew of terror attacks, and she suffered for it.
Yeah, she did. It is low energy. I mean, she's not the best campaigner, and I think it also probably weighed on her shoulders or weighed her down when it came to people's votes, the fact that when she was Home Secretary, she cut down so much on the police force in the United Kingdom, and at this time we see what a necessity that is to keep people safe.